Good morning, everyone, to our 100 authors in 100 days. And today I'm super excited because I get to have this amazing veteran Army woman who is here sharing her story with us this morning. Her name is Claudia Arceo Navarrete, and her comedian name is Caramelo. So sounds really fun. I'm excited to be interviewing her this morning. And how are you doing, Claudia? I know you're over there in Maryland.
Yes, buenos dias. Thank you, Adriana, for inviting me to this. I'm excited. I'm glad to finally have a conversation with you instead of just typing it.
I know.
Yes, Maryland is going through the seasons. We get all four seasons in 1 week. So I think today it's fall.
Yeah.
But we might have winter tonight. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
depends.
So for everyone out there who's watching, just let you know that Claudia is participating in the Latinas 100 project. She is a co-author for a book that's launching in December, and she has submitted an essay slash story that she shared within the book, and that is the essay that I'm going to share with you this morning. Not all of it, but some of it. So I'm excited, Claudia, about your essay. I was reading it this morning, and well, actually, I had read it a couple of times, so we're back and forth, right, with the edits and everything. But I highlighted a couple of things, and one of the things that really caught my eye in your essay was how you had this experience when you were in San Diego, and you were traveling with a friend, right, to San Diego, and you were telling one of your friends that you had never actually crossed over to Mexico walking. Can you share a little bit about that story? Because I knew you included in the essay, and I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, so I went to San Diego because we wanted to cross over to Tijuana. So we went and I was like, let's go walking. So we walked. We spent the day there and then we walked over back to the States. And as we're crossing back through the border into the United States, I make jokes like I do all the time. And then it hit me that this place was familiar to me. And then I realized that 30 years prior, I had crossed that same border walking as a 7-year old, where my mom, when we had left Mexico City, we went to Tijuana and my mom crossed us over and she went through a pollero or a coyote and she went one way and I went another way. She went through the car way and I went the walkway. And it was a very scary time for me as a 7-year old, with total strangers, not knowing what is going on. I had no clue. I didn't know that there was differences in countries and borders and all that. I didn't understand any of that. So now 30 years later, I think, well, my mom crossed in a car with a passport and a visa. So she did it legally. I'm a US born citizen, so I can come in and out the States legally. So I put two and two together and I asked my mom, why didn't you just buy a flight from Mexico City to LA? And she
Right.
said, because since she wasn't a US citizen and I was, once we got into the United States, they would take me away from her. And me being her, everything she had, I'm still only been her only child. She was scared of that. And that's why we went on this big excavation of traveling from Mexico City to Tijuana. But it's just one of those things, like you don't know what you don't know.
And it
And
was
it
in
was
the
just a
80s, right?
flashback.
Was
It
it
was a what? I'm sorry?
in the 80s?
It happened in 1990.
Oh,
So
yeah.
38, 37 years. I mean, yeah, not 37, 27.
So that
So
was what
the math.
during the Clinton administration, right? No.
1990, no, Clinton wasn't in yet.
Oh,
Clinton came in 1993.
okay. So it was Bush.
So it was the first Bush, yes.
Yeah.
That's when all this was going on.
Wow.
And 7 years old, I don't know what's going on, but now 30 years later, I'm thinking, oh, okay. I think that could have gone completely differently.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring up that story is because as I was reading your essay, I was like, whoa, she was a little girl. She doesn't probably know what's going on at the time, and then she has you call it pollero, I call it coyote, but you call it pollero because it's a woman, right? Which you educated me on that because I didn't know that was in Spanish también. And then you talk about how you were really embarrassed because you didn't know English.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
struggled a lot. I struggled a lot growing up. I came in, so I was a very young, very smart kid. So I came in at being 7 years old in fourth grade
Mm.
and not speaking English. So it was a challenge for me. I had really good teachers first during the rest of my elementary years. And I had a lot of ESL classes after school and during school. And I just tried really hard to learn this language. And of course, my mom not speaking any English, I spoke Spanish at home. So I only had the English exposure through TV or school.
Yeah.
And the kids, the kids can be ruthless. So the one I remember all the time is I couldn't say the number 6.
Yeah.
So the kids caught on to that, and they were like, Claudia, say, dinos el 6 en inglés. And then I'm like, sex? And they're like, it's so funny. She said sex. And I'm like, I still don't know what sex is. So I don't know what they're laughing at. I'm like, what's so funny? And later on I caught on, and it bothered me so much that I made it an effort to speak English to a degree that nobody would know that I can speak Spanish unless you asked me to.
Wow. Yeah, I highlighted that in part of your essay when I was reading it. I was like, oh no, how terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of us, because I also were back and forth to Mexico, and one time my parents separated and we ended up in Hermosillo. And then when we came back a couple years later, I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade, around the same time you were, and I was in ESL. I couldn't remember English. So it was really hard. And I also had that moment, I think for a lot of us Latinas, where we hit that moment of reality being in the United States, that unless you assimilate, you will never be accepted. Unless you drop the accent, you'll never be accepted. And I think that's kind of what I got from reading this. These kids were teasing you and you were so embarrassed. And because I think that for all of us, we get to a point where we understand how the world works, at least to a certain degree. And we say, hey, we have to assimilate if I want to be part of this. And, that however a little mind thinks, a little child thinks really different, right? But we make these decisions as young kids, and then we grow up to be these adults with all these, I call them these wounds or these injuries that we have to then later heal. And I just hear a lot of it here. Like as I was reading your essay, I'm like getting goosebumps because I was like, oh, it's such a similar story, And then you go on to talk about I'll just read a couple of sentences. And then the reason why I'm not going into the full, for those of you who are watching, I'm not going into the full essay because I want you to go out and buy the book, and I want you to go out and buy the book on her webpage, because I'm pretty sure you'll have the book on your webpage, right, Claudia?
Correct. Yes.
And you definitely want to get it from her. But there's a part in your essay, in the story that you share, you say, being a daughter of an illegal immigrant generated daily fear that my mother could be taken away from me any day, that I would get home from school and my mother would be nowhere to be found. And I think that that's going on right now, even 20 years later. Mm-hmm. And that's a sad reality for a lot of kids and a lot of Latino children right now that were born and raised here. And then that is the massive fear. And then you go on to say that, you were a good student in high school. And this is what really captivated me too, because you say that your GPA was really high. You could have gone to a 4-year university, but there was nobody around you that actually told you that that was even possible. So you ended up going to a community college. And then at some point, you say, I only did the best that I could with the information that was given to me.
Correct.
And that brought memories to me, because we go back to this thing about, for especially Latinos in this country, is it isn't that we don't have certain things. It's we don't have the barrier is the access to information or the access to certain things. So like people are like, well, you have no excuse because you have the internet. You can look anything up, right? Which at some degree is true, but at the other degree, most of the Latino community still are not connected to the internet at home.
And it's not even that, but I mean, you have to know what you're looking for and then go looking for it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So yeah,
but you
sure.
don't know.
Mm-hmm. It
So,
yeah. So that was really interesting. So I only did the best thing that I could with the information that was given to me. And I remember, for me personally, we were actually in a Watsonville, which was 99% Latino, and it was during the time in 1989 where they were making an effort to integrate the school. So we were shipped to Aptos, an all-white school, and everybody there was college bound. Like there was no, but everybody was talking about college there. Even when you were a freshman, that question was, what university are you going to? Or are you going to Yale, to Harvard? And it was a big deal. And I was like, what's Yale? What's Harvard? Like I didn't know, right? But
right,
then my friends in Watsonville High, where it was primarily Latino, they were like, what job are you going to get? You know, where are you
right,
going to go work? Are you going to go work at the bank? Are you going to, and they weren't talking about university,
right.
at least in my field. So I resonated with that. And then can you tell me about how it was that the recruiter came to you, the Army recruiter?
Well, recruiters just dig people out of records, school records, whatever records. I don't know. They have some magic tricks that they put names in a bag and they just take them out. However, they called me, and I literally had turned 17 2 days before they called me.
Mm.
So my birthday is November 22nd. They called me November 24th. And they said, hey, you want to join the Army? I said, oh, that sounds cool. What I got to do? Like literally, that's how it went down. But I didn't want to leave home. So I told him I have been seeing the commercials of the Army Reserve where they say you could do 2 days a month, 1 week a year. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I can be a soldier 2 days a month and still live my regular life. So I told him, I want to do that thing they do on TV where you only go for 2 days a month. And he was like, oh, so you want to be a reservist? He's like, no problem. He's like, come into the office and you'll talk to the reserve recruiter. So I went into the office, talked to the reserve recruiter. He explained all that to me. And I said, cool, that sounds good. Let's do it. He said, well, you're 17, so you can't go to the Army. We have to get your mom's approval. My mom was like, no, absolutamente estás loca. Not gonna happen. You're gonna eat, your food's gonna be a pill, like all these horror stories, right? And I was like, Mom, it's not that bad. So the recruiter came over and I told my mom, hey, listen, he's coming. O firmas o yo firmo when I turn 18. Like, take a pick. But I'm doing this. I want to do this. So when the recruiter came over, I'll never forget, she told me, bueno, pues vamos a firmar tu sentencia. Meaning, let me go sign your sentence like I was gonna die or be in jail forever or something. So she signed for me, and then I shipped off. We signed in November. I raised my right hand in December. And then in July, I shipped off for basic training and my military occupation. And then I came back home in December and did my regular reserve time from there.
Mm, that's interesting. And then you say, when you were in the military, there I didn't know yet during my entire military career I would have to always prove myself because I was a woman.
Yeah, I know you can resonate with that. Most of us can, just in the regular civilian world. So imagine being in a military world where it's dominated by males. My position or my military occupation was a automated logistics specialist, which is the person that works hand in hand with the mechanics. So I'm kind of, to get a better understanding of my job, I was that auto zone person that's over the desk and then you have the parts behind and you just go and say, hey, I need new brake pads. That was me. I'm that person in the military. That's what I did. So I was always with the mechanics. So where they kept all the vehicles and parts and stuff, they called that the motor pool. And in the motor pool, it was mainly males, because you're working with cars and stuff, you really don't have females. And when I got shipped off to go to Fort Bragg after 9/11 happened and Operation Iraqi hit in 2003, I got shipped off to work in the rear. So I never went to Iraq or Afghanistan in the front. I always worked in the shadows in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always the support in the rear. And I was in the motor pool with 30 other males in different positions, different type of mechanics. And I was the only female. And I remember one day that they were having what they called a pallet mission. What they were doing is putting equipment in a pallet, and then they were shipping it over to Iraq. And it was a short mission. It was, I think they were doing like 30-day missions where they would just get the equipment, go to throughout different places in Iraq, drop off the equipment, and then come back.
Yeah.
So they had teams of like 6 or 7, and they had a list that they had going, who's going this month, that month. And they always had like, they had the list up. And I remember I would see the list to see if I ever got put on that list, because I always wanted to go to Iraq. I always wanted to go to Afghanistan. I wanted to do what a soldier was supposed to do. And I started noticing that they recycled the lists. And I was like, wait, Lopez just went. Rodriguez just came back. Why are they on the list again?
Yeah.
And I went and I talked to the officer in charge, and I said, hey, sir, I see all these lists are recycling, but I haven't had my chance to take on this mission. Like, what's going on? And then they're like, oh, well, it's because we're only taking mechanics. I said, well, that's not true, because Smith is not a mechanic. Roberts is not a mechanic. So why are they on the list?
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, I said, don't need to say anymore, sir. I know what the problem is. And he's like, what's the problem? I said, I'm a woman. You don't want to send a woman over because I'm going to be with the other males. And now they feel like they have to take care of me. I said, but let me tell you one thing. They don't have to take care of me, because you see this uniform that I have on? It's the same uniform you have on. And it's the same uniform they all have on. And you know what? The training that they did is the same training that I did. So just like I can take care of me, I can take care of them. And then I'm like, but I get it. So he just looked at me like, I don't know what I'm going to say to that one. And sure, you know what happened next? Instead of putting me on the next mission for the pallet delivery, they just shut down the entire mission. They stopped doing the pallet deliveries, because they didn't want to deal with me.
Wow.
So that's one of those that I felt like, really?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I want to believe, in a way, I know it's not true, but I want to believe that they do it because they want to protect us, right?
I think that's what they think, but that was my whole point. Yes, I get it. You want to protect me, but what you forget is we went through the same training. I didn't go through a female soldier training and you went through a male soldier training. We went through the same Army basic training. Yep. I shot the same weapons you shot. I crawled on the ground just like you did. I dug up a foxhole just like you did. Like, there's nothing different except my gender. And yet physically, biologically, I may be a little weaker, but when it comes down to the training, we did the exact same thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the military. I mean, I'm always really grateful for that experience, and thanks to the American tax dollars and all your taxes, I was able to travel the world. But you know, there are all some limitations, right? There, you get these stories, and I have similar stories to that too. And you know, I stick to my story. I know it's not true. And you know, like, oh, they're trying to protect us, but you know, we all know what's really happening, right? So and then you go on in your essay to say, I want to read just a little bit. I had to fight and be strong. Now more than ever, I had to set an example. As a single mother, I was told to forget about traveling and not having any more fun. I was pretty much told that my motherhood couldn't be fun, and that it would be a drag. And I really resonate with that, because I was a single mom for 7 years, and I loved it. It was so much fun. Yet everybody around me thought that I needed help, and oh, pobrecita, mira, es madre soltera, oh, and everybody like was so ashamed of me, but I was never ashamed of me. And so I love that you put this here, because that was what you were told, but then you were like, girl, living it up, you know, doing your thing, you know, traveling with your child. You have a daughter or son?
I have 2 daughters now, but at the moment, I just had one daughter with them, and that my oldest, she just turned 16 yesterday.
Wow.
And she's been traveling since she was 3 weeks old. She has traveled probably half of the country. She's gone to at least 3 continents. She's gone to 5 or 6 countries. She's very cultured, very diverse, very open-minded, and that was one thing that I I I had a point to prove, because first of all, yes, soy mexicana, but that doesn't mean I have to be at home barefoot and pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, that means I can still, I have a career. I can support my household. So I pretty much say I'm the man of the house. And that's how I run my household. And I the one thing that, so my daughter is a junior in high school, and the one thing I push since she was in 8th grade, I said, listen, you're going to college, you're going to college. I said, I don't want to hear it. So my daughter is very challenging, as far as not challenging. She likes to take on a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So she's competitive. So I told her, listen, you're gonna have to match my education or better. So what did I do? I went off and I got a master's degree. So now her bare minimum is a master's. She has to match me or better. And that's what I told her she had to do. And I told her, and if you don't do it, then that means your mom is better than you. And she's like, what? No, nope, I got this, mom. I got this. I was like, okay, well then go prove to me that you're better than me.
So
And
that's awesome. So then
she,
you have
she,
your 16-year-old daughter, and then how old is your other daughter?
my other one just turned 4.
Oh, so she's a little one. Yeah.
Yes, I have a little one and a big one.
I have a 4-year-old too, and I had him when I was 40. So you can imagine, for me, it's like a lot of work.
No, it's a lot of work for me, and I had her at 33. So, so
Yeah,
I can.
that's a young end. Yeah, it's still 30, but to have children in your 40s is like, what? Which I love. I highly encourage it because it keeps you in shape, right? But I love that you made it a point to share it in your story. Like, the fact that you're a parent and you don't have a partner doesn't make you any weaker or any worse off than anybody. It is what it is. And that was one thing that I fought for a lot when, especially in my surroundings at the time when I had my son 14 years ago on my own. It was this really sad kind of, like, everybody looked at me like, oh, pobrecita. And I was like, what are you talking about? I make more money than all of you put together.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
But it was this, and it was, the sad part was, it was within the community, like la familia, mi mamá, and then I had somebody, and one of my sisters is like, oh, well, no le digas a nadie en el trabajo porque después qué van a decir.
No. Even better, my family tells me, with that lifestyle of yours, how are you supposed to get a husband? I said, what lifestyle? Like, I go to school, I have a career. Like, what's the lifestyle that we're talking about here? Because I mean,
why do you need a husband? Why do you need a husband? Like,
right, like, I have all this down for myself. Like, what's the problem? But I think it comes down to, I'm not successful unless there's a man in my life. So I can have a million businesses that generate millions of dollars. I could be the next Bill Gates, but if I don't have a husband, I'm not successful.
I know, girl. I'm telling you, we need to have that conversation, because
that is
it's
our
awful.
culture.
It's so awful. It's like, and then the first thing that la gente te pregunta is like, ¿y no te has casado?
Yes,
¿No te has
girl.
casado?
Yes.
¿Y no tienes novio? It's
no,
like,
yeah.
like, are you serious? Like sometimes, I can get a little rude sometimes, because I'm like, look at what that person that's telling me this, I'm like, look at what you're endorsing. You're endorsing that a woman is less because she doesn't have a man.
Yep.
When in reality, it's like, dude, we, especially as military women, right? Because we can hold our own, and we're like, may or may not happen. A husband is a nice to have, but it's not something that's required,
Yeah.
So
yep. I always say, I choose to have a man. I don't need a man.
Yeah.
And but it is nice. It is nice to have a partner. It's nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and join you on escapades, or just hear you out on how your day went. But it's not a necessity. It's just something to be there. I want to, like I always say, I want a partnership. I want to be in a relationship that doesn't feel like a relationship. And everybody looks at me like, what? And I'm like, because we're so used to once you have a man, you do what the man says, and what he says goes, and he has the last word. Is like, wait a second, no, no, no. This is a 50-50 train track. Like we're gonna go, you're gonna tell me about your stuff and I'm gonna tell you about yours, and then we're gonna do this together. Like that's the whole purpose. And they all look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
what world do you live in? And I was like, Claudia's world. Maybe that's why I'm single.
Yeah, and you know, I don't mean any disrespect for any of the women that are out there, and you know, that's their dream and goal to one day get married and have children. I think it's a beautiful life. I mean, I have that life, but at the same time, you know, I always like to, you know, as a what do you call that? As a not a subtitle, but as and the fine print is not, you know, husband not required, because in reality, I think we're fortunate enough to live in within a culture that. That allows for a woman to pretty much be very independent and to have the
Yes.
choice, which I think is super important, right? To have the choice on whether or not you get married or you don't get married or you just don't believe in it, and that's okay, you know. So I think
Right.
I like that you included that, and then you made it a point to share that. So before I wrap it up with you, I'm so grateful that you're deciding to participate in the project, and you had mentioned that your nickname, because you also do comedy, stand-up comedy, and that your nickname is Caramelo. Can you tell me a little bit about like when you perform and how you got into comedy? Because I would love to see you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. First of all, let me thank you for what you're doing. This whole project is amazing. I think it's a great idea. I'm loving it every second of the way. It's definitely very important for us to leave our mark, to let the younger generations know that there are options, and we are proof that those options are available.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's nothing wrong with being pregnant and barefoot and cooking all day, but that's your choice. If you choose to go that route, then that's fine, do it, but know that there are other options. That's not the only option, because I grew up the same way, thinking, what's the point of going to college? I'm gonna get married and have kids anyway, and the man's just gonna take care of me.
Yes.
And I actually had a boyfriend tell me, what if you marry a low life and he can't support you? So you're gonna have to figure out something for yourself. So I suggest you go to college, and then si te toca, te tocó, y si no, well then at least you have an education in your background. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. So so it's very interesting, and it's a lesson learned along the way. Everything that we experience, I like the whole idea of us being that example for the upcoming generations of our especially with our culture and how we are brought up. I think it's great for us to show that there's a difference.
Mhm.
And I went in to get back to your question, because I'd be all over the place all the time. I started doing stand-up comedy because people think I'm funny, and I'll just literally be having a conversation and people are laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? Like, I'm serious. Like, it's not
You
a joke.
are funny though. You are so funny, dude. Like you're like really, you're more than funny. You're really witty. So as I'm
uh,
listening to you, I'm like just laughing because I'm like,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I had a lot of people tell me that. So there's an opportunity for a veteran program called Armed Services Arms Partnership that's out here in DC. And I joined that program. It's for veterans. And I went, and one of the girls told me, hey, you would be really good as a storyteller. I was like, man, I'm more interested in like comedy. I want to see what I can do with comedy. So she said, okay, we'll sign up for the comedy class. I signed up for the comedy class, and I did my first show. And let me tell you, joke writing is hard. It's really hard,
yeah,
because
that's what I'm told.
you have to make it hit. So it's really hard. But I had fun with it. We have a little team of comedians, veteran comedians, and we do free shows for veteran organizations. That's pretty much what we do. It's like a hobby for us. And the name Caramelo came from one of my veteran buddies that said, I was thinking what name. They were like, you should get a stage name. And I was like, oh, I'll just be Claudia. I'll just be Claudia alone, because nobody can say my last name anyway. So I'll just be Claudia. And then one of the guys was like, no, you should be Caramello. Like the chocolate caramello with a double L. And I was like, why? And he's like, because you're thick and sweet. I was like, oh,
Oh
wow.
my god.
from there, I was like, well, why not?
I
was like,
love
I like
it.
the way it sounds, Caramelo. So now when I do my shows, instead, because they could never say my last name, so instead of introducing me as Claudia Arceo, because they're like Claudia Arceo Arco, I'm like, forget it. Let me give you something easier. So now they just say Claudia Caramelo. Now I'm like, okay, sounds a little better. You can't mess that one up. And that's my stage name now.
I love
Claudia
it. I love it. I saw that on your webpage. So I'm gonna, for anybody watching, I'm gonna put up some of her products. She has a really amazing webpage where she has a lot of products, and that's where I saw your name, Caramelo, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. I would love to see you. I would love to see one of your shows. And then, well, I was talking to a lot of the girls from the project, and we were thinking about maybe doing, at least as a matter of fact, her and I were talking about maybe doing next year a Latinas 100 conference where all the women get to share their stories on stage. And so I would love for you to be like the opening act, right? With the comedy. That would be so cool.
Either. Tempranito. I would be the first one there.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to come to Vegas, right? It'll be like a Vegas vacation for everybody.
Hey, girls trip. Let's do it. I'm all over it. You tell me trip, I say when. My bags are packed. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So sometime next year, probably around this time in October or something. So it's not so hot for people, right? But anyways, I want to thank you so much, Claudia, for sharing this story and sharing this story for the Latinas 100 project. And for just being who you are. I just love that you shared what you shared, because it's really important for the younger generation to hear your story, to hear your voice, and to see a woman that is as strong as you, that has overcome so much, and there's so many of us that can learn so much from you. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being funny, because you are. And
thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you when we do the event next year, or when we do the book launch, because we're doing the book launch December 19th. So,
okay.
So the last question from me to you is, what is like a statement or a word or an idea that you want to leave for the next generation?
So I was looking for a title for my story, and what I came up with was the infamous dicho, el que persevera alcanza. So I look for the best translation for that, and it's pretty much he who perseveres will reach. Mm-hmm. I have become a big fan of the word tenacity, mm-hmm. and I think that goes hand in hand with perseverance. So I think if you can be tenacious enough to persevere, you're going to reach whatever you need to reach. And I always say the worst that can happen is nothing. So keep trying.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, Claudia. So check out the book that's going to be on her webpage sometime after December 19th. And check out the book launch as well for the Latinas 100 project. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this YouTube channel, 100 Authors in 100 Days. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks, Claudia.
And thank you, Adriana, for the invitation. Have a great one. It was lovely.